It feels surreal to talk about it now, to be like, how could I have done this? I had all of these people. I had friends to support me. I had family that cared about me. But the tricky thing about my depression was that it fooled me into thinking I was totally alone, that I was totally beyond help, that like this is what I was doomed to experience as long as I was alive. I'm Kate. I live with depression, and I know that I have a lot of tools to make it through whatever life throws at me. I think some of the sadness that I felt and looking back on it, being able to call it depression, it was very internal, because the way that I presented to the world was as this really happy-go-lucky, bubbly, gregarious person. Like nobody probably would have pegged me for being as sad or depressed as I was. I had a good group of friends, but I always just felt like a little bit of an outcast. And probably when I was about 12 is when I started to just feel really down, really overwhelmed, full of self-doubt. And I'd say that that's when self-harm became one of my coping mechanisms. Fortunately, my parents paid good attention to me, and as soon as they saw or noticed that behavior, they got me into a therapist immediately, which was awesome. I think the big feeling for me was just a pretty deep loneliness. So I think when I got to high school, all of those sad feelings that I was holding in, they really started to weigh me down. And I remember coming home from a party one night and I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm just done with this. That was the night that I decided that I was going to take my life. I guess I spent a couple days in the hospital recovering from that. It's really hard to sit here and say, like, I still wound up hospitalized again for my depression after my suicide attempt. And the next time I wound up hospitalized was for self-harm again. And I spent a month in Pathways that ultimately probably saved my life. I think it's that knowledge that makes me stay on top of my game, to be like, okay, what does it look like for me when I start to get low, when I start to get depressed? My big indicators are withdrawal, like when I isolate myself from my family, from my friends, when I don't reach out to other people. I stop going on my morning walks. I start to notice just how I'm slipping in the negative self-talk and the lack of motivation and the lack of connection to other people. And wrestling with depression isn't easy. It's exhausting. It's exhausting when you don't want to do anything, when you don't have the energy or the motivation. And yet, you have to find the strength to just do the next thing, no matter how small it is. And so between developing that self-awareness or, getting myself into therapy, that work is all so important. I think the hardest part about it is just having the courage to be really honest with yourself, and to have the courage to be honest with somebody else about thoughts that can feel really shameful, or really dark or really scary. But what I've found through therapy, through having people to talk with, is that when you name these things, when you name the depression, when you name thoughts about suicide, that at least for me, they carried a little less weight, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone in it. when I was 16 or 17 years old, it was then that I decided that I'm going to be a therapist someday. I'm going to do this. From that time, I knew that part of my work and my mission was going to be about destigmatizing mental health, particularly for young people. There's the strongest pull for me to do whatever I can to making a difference. One of the most important things that I have learned through this whole process is that there's so much that I can do to keep my depression at bay. Two things have been really crucial, and one of those things is learning how to find the best in the present moment, not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, just being here now. And being really, really intentional about practicing self-compassion. And what always comes to mind for me is that this is something that I get to manage, and it's manageable. It's one of the most manageable mental health challenges there is. To be willing to encounter yourself in such a dark place and be like, okay, this is where I am right now, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But I think the thing that I always remember when there's that part inside of me that's resistant to getting help, that's resistant to going back to therapy, that's resistant to doing the things that I know I need to do to take care of myself, I just have to remind myself that there are so many things within my power that I can do to go through this, to make it through to the other side.